Hello, my YouTube audience. I'm the Crime Whisper, and I'm here to help you tonight. I know many of you use these videos to fall asleep. So before you drift off, make sure to like the video and subscribe to the channel also. Where are you watching from? And what time is it for you right now? Now, take a deep breath, get comfortable and relaxed. Seismograph needle jerked 3 times in rapid succession, though the air hung perfectly stilled. Been working survey contracts in rural Ohio for 11 years, long enough to recognize when the land wanted to say something. The creek bed stretched before us, like a scar through the autumn forest. Dry as chalk dust, despite the heavy rain, 2 nights before my colleagues, Bennett, with his ridiculous safari vest, and Rodriguez, always checking his phone for a signal that never came, had gone quiet an hour. A guide found the sinkhole at 1447. Marked the coordinates. That's when the forest started to rearrange itself. The hole measured 8 feet across. Edges still crumbling, fresh limestone substrate. Common here, but the collapse pattern was wrong. Sinkholes usually form gradually, with warning signs, sagging ground, dying vegetation, circular depressions. This one had just appeared like something had punched through from underneath, instead of settling from above. Crouched near the edge, clay still raw and wet, while Bennett snapped photos and Rodriguez set up the ground-penetrating radar. The cavity descended at least 40 feet before the signal turned to static. Limestone caves have structure, readable geometry. This was noised and the first tree fell. A crack echoed through the forest, about 200 yards northeast, unmistakable wood rupturing under sudden pressure. But there was no wind, no storm. The air was perfectly still through the bare November branches. I watched a mature oak tilt and crash through the understory, roots tearing up earth like flesh. Bennett froze. Rodriguez stared at his radar, thumb white against the edge of the device. 20 seconds later, another tree. Same sound farther west. No lightning, no rot, just sudden collapse, as if something enormous had shouldered it. A side eye pulled out my notebook. Steady hands. Old habit. 2 trees down the sinkhole as the vertex. They formed a perfect 120-degree arc. Nature doesn't do geometry. Rodriguez finally spoke. Seismic activity. Maybe a collapse spreading underground. I checked the seismograph. Microtremors. Yes, but irregular. 3 pulses. Pause. 3 more. Pause. Almost rhythmic. Almost deliberate. Bennett wanted to pack up and leave, but the contract required a full perimeter survey, and stubbornness or pride kept me going. We split up, each taking a third of the circle. Radios on the forest floor felt wrong. Soil that should have been firm instead yielded, like something had disturbed it from below. I marked waypoints, collected data, checked elevations, but the readings shifted. My first elevation, 847 feet, 10 minutes later. That same point read, 844 3 feet. Ganai called Bennett. Static, then fragments. Seeing that too. Readings not Rodriguez found. Then silence by the time I returned toward the sinkhole. Every orange marker I'd planted was gone, not blown away, removed, bent slightly, as if pulled by gloved hands. Then a crackle on the radio. You need to see the marks. Rodriguez's voice stripped to pure fear. I found them both kneeling at the western edge, parallel grooves, carved deep into the limestone, leading from the trees straight to the hole, and stopping for each a foot wide. Pressed deep into the earth. Not animal, not human. Something heavy had moved through here. Quietly. Bennett's face was pale. I saw them form. He whispered. The mud shifted like something invisible was walking. Rodriguez's radar trembled in his hands. Cavities growing, he said. It's 43 feet deep now. It was 40 just half an hour ago. Sinkholes don't grow while you watch, not without sound, not without collapse. Then movement just at the edge of my vision. Something huge between the trees, unseen, but definitely there. We're leaving, I said quietly. We'll report from the office. Tell the state geologist to restrict access. Bennett's voice cracked. What do we even tell them? That trees are falling in geometric patterns. That something left tracks, but we never saw it. And I had no answer, only the rhythmic pulse from the seismograph. 3 beats. Pause. 3 more like something underground. Listening back, my profession runs on empirical data, measurable phenomena, reproducible results. Topographers don't write reports about forests that feel wrong, or about spaces occupied by nothing visible. We don't talk about the weight of being watched by something that shouldn't exist. We packed our gear with the efficient haste of people who've decided to retreat, but won't admit to fleeing. My hands stayed steady, muscle memory from years of fieldwork, while my mind spiraled in tight, anxious loops. The GPS coordinates would lead us back to the service road, a straight quarter-mile northwest to the truck, except when I pulled up the waypoint. The map showed our vehicle had moved not far, maybe 40 yards south, but we'd left it locked, on level ground, parking brake set. Key right there in my pocket. I checked still. They're solid real. Let me see your GPS. I told Rodriguez, same reading. Either the truck had moved, or the forest had moved around it, or both devices were failing from some localized electromagnetic disturbance, which might explain the radio static, the warped elevation data, the expanding cavity. That explanation felt like holding up a sheet of paper against a hurricane. We started walking. I kept my compass steady at 130 magnetic, counting paces for dead reckoning backup. The forest canopy seemed thicker now, which made no sense for November bare branches. The light filtering down had shifted gold, deepening into amber, shadows stretching like long-reaching fingers. Listen, Rodriguez whispered. I heard it to a rhythmic scraping sound from the direction of the sinkhole, like something massive dragging itself across stone. 3 beats, pause. 3 beats, pause. The same pattern as the seismic tremors. Bennett picked up his pace, not quite running, but close. I caught his arm. Stay together, stay visible. Don't let that I stopped saying it out loud, would make it real. Would mean admitting we'd crossed from rational terrain into something else entirely. Don't let what Bennett demanded. We don't even know what it is. Maybe it's just. The sentence ended in a thunderous crack. A tree, a massive oak, collapsed directly across our path, not ahead, not behind, across the exact line we would have walked. In 30 seconds it fell, with that same brutal suddenness, roots ripping from the ground, trunks smashing through the undergrowth. 3 professionals with technical degrees stood there frozen, staring at a wall of timber that felt less like coincidence and more like interception. Go around it, I said finally. Keep heading, don't stop. We detoured south, stepping over debris, pushing through brush that clung to our vests like it didn't want to let go. The GPS showed we were roughly on course, 20 yards deviation. Acceptable. The truck's waypoint had stabilized right where we left it. That steadiness felt like a lifeline. Then Rodriguez stumbled, tripping over something half buried in leaves. Another set of gouges, 4 deep parallel grooves dragging through the soil. As if something had pulled itself forward, they crossed our path and vanished into the brush. How many were there? The thought froze my lungs. 1 unknown presence is manageable. Multiple suggest coordination, intelligence, purpose. The scraping stopped, and the silence that followed was worse. Total stillness, no wind, no insects. The forest itself holding its breath. We broke through the tree line at 1647. Exactly where the GPS said we should. The truck sat there on the service road, white paint dull under the dying sun, tire marks undisturbed, perfectly ordinary, painfully normal. Bennett went for the driver's door. I stopped him. Check the perimeter first. He gave me a look, half confusion, half disbelief, but Rodriguez nodded. We circled the vehicle. Nothing, no tracks, no marks, just gravel, dust, and the shallow ruts of maintenance trucks. I unlocked it. We loaded up in silence, each of us touching the metal frame like we needed to make sure it was really. Started the engine. It caught immediately. Dashboard lights glowing soft, amber and green, normal, safe, human. Then I saw it in the rearview mirror. For 1 impossible second, something stood at the tree line. Massive, wrong, geometrically impossible. It filled too much space. Limbs bending at angles that didn't belong in nature. A shape my brain refused to hold on to. Then it was gone. Just shadows, just trees, just Foresti drove. Rodriguez stared straight ahead. Bennett clutched his camera like a crucifix. None of us spoke until we reached the highway. until civilization reasserted itself through power lines and cell towers and noise at the county planning office. I filed my report strictly technical preliminary data recommendation for further study. No mention of geometry and trees, of tracks that appeared from nowhere, of the thing that might still be watching us. The state geologist approved a full survey. For spring I've returned 3 times, since never closer than the road. The GPS coordinates are always the same, but the forest never looks identical, not changed exactly, just different. Like a photograph still developing an image half emerged, half hidden. Seismograph data I reviewed later showed those rhythmic pulses. Continuing for 6 hours after we left 3 beats, pause 3 beats, until sunset, then nothing. Bennett quit field work. Rodriguez still contracts, but never near that county once, after too many beers. He told me he still sees those grooves when he closes his eyes. Gouges dragging into darkness, leading nowhere or everywhere. Sometimes, late at night, I open my field notebook. The sketch is still there. 2 fallen trees, a sinkhole. A perfect geometric archive. Tried to convince myself it was exhaustion, shared delusion. The brain finding patterns where none exist. But I remember what Rodriguez said the last time we spoke about it. Maybe it wasn't trying to hurt us. Maybe it was just curious, wondering what we were. What we'd do if it showed itself, whether we'd understand. And I don't know what's worse. That something that vast and alien exists beneath Ohio farmland. Or that it's still curious, still listening, still waiting to finish the patterment. Maybe that was mercy. Maybe that was the point. Some truths don't survive contact with daylight. And some shapes aren't meant to be seen. Whole months passed, the warmth faded. Mostly life filled itself back in. Deadlines, grocery lists, emails. All the small scaffolds that keep your mind upright. Sometimes, I could almost believe it hadn't happened. That the memory was just the body's way of cataloging fear. But then I'd catch my reflection in a window. And for the briefest instant, my back would look wrong, shoulders to square, spine slightly curved outward, like something still resting there, invisible but present. I started hearing from Jay less often. The last message he sent was a photo from another climb, not at the gorge, somewhere farther south, with the caption different stone. Same feeling. I didn't reply when I checked his account a week later. It was gone, deactivated. Maybe something else. A few nights after that, I dreamed I was back on the slab. The rock was warm under my palms. The sky was that endless autumn blue. Empty of clouds, I started to climb, feeling stronger, lighter. Like gravity had grown tired of me. But when I looked down, there was no rope, no harness, no ground, just that orange sandstone stretching away in every direction. Like a map without borders. And there were other handprints now, hundreds of them, white against the red, overlapping, fading into each other, some small, some enormous, some reaching down, some reaching up. As I climbed higher, I realized they weren't handprints at all, not impressions left on the stone, but shapes emerging from it. The rock wasn't marked by touch, it was remembering when I woke. My sheets were streaked with chalk. I threw the piece I kept in my pocket into the trash that morning, but later that night, when I reached for my keys, it was there again. Same size, same worn edges, same faint heat when I touched it. I didn't put it back, I didn't take it out, either. I just drove no destination. Just asphalt and white lines, and the kind of silence that presses in from the edges around dawn. I pulled over at a rest stop somewhere past Lexington. A low ridge rose behind the parking lot, its face pale in the early light. There was graffiti on it, names, dates, declarations of love, and, halfway up, faint but unmistakable, a single white handprint net. I stood there for a long time, the world around me waking up, trucks idling, birds starting their morning arguments. Sunlight creeping higher, ordinary sounds, ordinary light, but the ridge stayed in shadow. And that handprint didn't fade. I don't climb anymore. I don't camp. I don't even drive near stone that looks too smooth, too patient. But sometimes, when I walk past a construction site and smell fresh-cut limestone, I feel the air shift, like a breath drawn in by something vast, and waiting just beneath the surface hand. Then, without thinking, my fingers go to my pocket, just to make sure the chalk is still there. I spent the rest of the night on my laptop, researching infrasound. Low-frequency vibrations below human hearing range can create feelings of dread and the sensation of a presence certain architectural features produce. Standing waves that affect the human nervous system. Carbon monoxide causes hallucinations, mold exposure triggers, paranoia by dawn. I'd compiled a list of 17 testable hypotheses and ordered equipment for each: carbon monoxide detector, EMF reader, infrared thermometer, audio recorder capable of capturing infrasonic frequencies, air quality monitor, even a portable seismograph I borrowed from a former colleague when the deliveries arrived 3 days later. The building manager looked amused at the growing pile of boxes outside my door. She joked that I was starting a laboratory. I smiled and told her it was for a side project. That much, at least, was true. I set up the detectors systematically. No anomalies at first. CO levels were normal EMF readings, consistent with urban baseline. The infrasound recorder captured the hum of distant traffic and the rhythmic pulse of the elevator machinery. Nothing out of range. I should have felt relief instead. I felt watched at 2:43 a.m. on the fourth night. The audio recorder triggered automatically when I played it back the next morning. The first 40 seconds were silence, then a low pulse, steady, almost biological, like the cadence of a massive heart beating somewhere behind the walls, then a voice. Faint and distorted, speaking a single word I couldn't parse. I ran the clip through filters, enhanced frequencies, inverted channels. The word remained untranslatable, half subsonic, half something the human throat wasn't designed to form. I considered sending the file to a colleague in signal analysis, but what would I say? My apartment is whispering to me. The rational part of my mind demanded more data, but another part, the one that woke me at night, with my pulse hammering, wanted the equipment gone that evening. I found a faint mark on the wall near the closet. Not dirt, not mold, a residue, gray and granular, as though someone had pressed a powder-covered palm against the paint and then erased it imperfectly. The outline was indistinct, smudged, but unmistakably human. I scraped a sample and ran it under the portable microscope. Calcium carbonate choke. I stopped sleeping after that 2 nights later. The pressure returned, the same hour, the same slow contraction of space. This time, I reached for the recorder immediately and whispered into it, asking if anyone was there. The temperature dropped 3 degrees. The infrared thermometer showed a single column of cold air extending from ceiling to floor where the shadow had been. Then something answered, not sound, vibration. The air itself shuddered in a rhythm too deliberate to be random. 3 pulses. Pause. 3 again. The same pattern the geologists had recorded in the limestone hollow months before I left the field. It took me a long time to realize I was standing. I don't remember getting out of bed, only that I found myself at the closet door, hand on the handle, every nerve in my body screaming to stop. But curiosity is stronger than fear, and arrogance stronger still. I opened it. Nothing inside, just my clothes, orderly, untouched, except for the back panel, where the drywall had bowed inward, subtle but definite, as if the wall itself were breathing. I pressed my palm against it. The surface was warm, and when I pulled my hand away, a second handprint appeared beside mine, larger, the chalk-white residue blooming from inside the paint. Not on it. That was when the power went out. Possibilities stayed on the table, though each felt thinner the longer I stared at it. At 5:02 a.m., the air pressure monitor flickered for a single second, just long enough to log an anomaly, a dip, so brief it could have been a glitch, or not. The day passed in an uneasy equilibrium. I taught my morning seminar over video, answered emails, smiled when necessary. The apartment seemed calm, almost benign, as if the night's exchange had satisfied something. Yet by evening, a thought began circling in my head with the slow insistence of a migrating storm front. It knew I saw it that night. I didn't intend to record, I wanted rest. Or at least the illusion of it, but routine 1. I opened the laptop, checked sensors, confirmed that all readings were nominal. I even laughed at myself. The laugh sounded too sharp, like glass underfoot. 3:14 a.m. The pressure returned. 3:16. Barometric data stable. 3:18. Sound recorder captured a faint low hum, subaudible, but present. 3:20. The air thickened again this time. I didn't freeze. I stood, turned toward the darkened living room, and waited. Show me, I said, if you exist. Show me. The hum deepened into resonance, not through the air, but inside my bones. My vision warped at the edges, as though space itself folded inward. The shape that emerged was not shadow, not light, but density, a knot in reality's fabric, struggling to hold form. I saw no face, but an impression of will, of directed purpose, like gravity deciding to notice me. Then, a sound, not speech, not language, but a reversal, the auditory equivalent of inhaling silence. My instruments registered nothing. The cameras showed static, but I felt it clearly, an attempt to align with me, to synchronize perception. My body moved without instruction. I reached out a hand toward the distortion. The air between us quivered like heated glass, and in that moment, before contact, I understood the pattern. Daniel Restrepo had been mapping it. Wasn't haunting, it was convergence to consciousnesses, occupying overlapping coordinates for a fraction of space-time pressure. Geometry, resonance, all variables aligning for observation. Then everything collapsed. The pressure snapped. The hum cut out, and I was alone again, gasping. The room normal. My laptop screen displayed a new folder, time-stamped 3:21 a.m. inside it. One file. Restripolog. I opened it. Only a single line of text. Acknowledgement is assimilation. The cursor blinked once, then the file erased itself. I haven't run any tests since. The sensor stayed dark now. The apartment stays silent, but some mornings, around 3 a.m., the pressure monitor still flickers to life for exactly 1 second, like something checking weather. I'm still here to notice it. Part of me knew that laughter wasn't coming. The world had shifted subtly, but permanently, as if the near miss hadn't just spared me, but selected me. The bourbon burned on the way down, grounding me for a moment. But the silence in the apartment didn't behave properly. It had texture. That's the first thing I remember thinking. Sound shouldn't have texture. The hum of the refrigerator faded in and out, not like a faulty motor, but like the entire room was breathing in sync with something beyond my walls. I turned on the TV for background noise, but every channel carried the same thing, a frozen frame of static, as though the signal itself had stalled mid-transmission. At 9:42 p.m., my phone buzzed with a notification. Unknown number, just 3 words. He noticed you. I deleted it immediately, convincing myself it was spam, a prank, a wrong number. But the moment my thumb hit delete, every light in the apartment dimmed to half strength and held there. No flicker, no surge, just a sustained dimness, like the building itself had exhaled and forgotten to inhale again. By 10:15, I'd poured a second drink and opened my laptop to write everything down. I've always believed that documentation restores control, that if you can record it, you can contain it. But the cursor blinked once, twice, and then began typing on its own, just 2 words before freezing again. Not yet. I slammed the lid shut hard enough to rattle the glass on my desk. My reflection in the window looked distorted, stretched, like the glass had thickened between me and the outside world behind me. The apartment looked subtly wrong. Angles didn't meet the way they had when I moved in. The corner by the kitchen was deeper now, as if someone had added distance to it. While I wasn't looking, the rational part of my mind fought back. Micro-seizure, stress, lingering trauma from the near collision. The human brain fills gaps with nonsense under duress. But then I saw the headlights outside, not from the street, from the alleyway, that dead-ended 10 stories below my window. A car idling, engine low and patient, the same dark set in it. Shouldn't have been possible to recognize. Not from this height, but I knew the same deliberate stillness. The same unnatural precision. The red glow of its taillights cast long streaks upward, like veins of light crawling along the brickwork. My phone buzzed again, this time no number, just coordinates: latitude, longitude. I plugged them into a map. It pinpointed my own building, and underneath, one more line appeared. You stepped off the curb. I stared at those words for a long time. At first I thought it meant when the car almost hit you, but now, hours later, the clock reads 2:11 a.m. I think it meant something else, that I hadn't stepped off the curb at all, but out of something, a boundary, a parameter, because outside the window, 10 stories below, the red taillights are still there, only now there's no car attached to them. Phone slowly, afraid of what might happen if I moved too fast. The apartment was utterly still, but that stillness felt wrong, charged, like the air before a thunderstorm. Then, from somewhere behind the walls, came a muffled thump, not loud, but heavy, intentional, followed by another and another, a steady, slow rhythm, like footsteps pacing just out of sight. I pressed myself against the wall, the bat trembling in my grip. The sound moved closer, circling me, traveling through the old pipes and vents, as if the building itself had become a conduit for something alive. The hum of the refrigerator cut out suddenly, plunging everything into a silence so complete I could hear the faint tremor of my own breath. Then, a whisper so close, I could almost feel it brushing the shell of my ear. You looked too long. The phone lit up in my hand, a new message, no number, just a blank contact and a photo. I opened it. It was my apartment, taken from outside. Through the living room window, the timestamp was 2 minutes ago. My throat tightened. I moved toward the curtains. One slow step at a time. I could see my reflection faintly in the glass. Pale and wide-eyed, I lifted one corner of the fabric, just enough to peek out. The parking lot below was empty, completely empty. No cars, no people, not even the flicker of a streetlight, just a still, black expanse, stretching out farther than it should have, farther than the lot had ever gone. I blinked, and for a moment, I saw movement, a shape, a person standing at the edge of the darkness, their head tilted as if studying me. The phone buzzed again, this time, a voice message. My hand shook so hard I almost dropped it, but I pressed plate. Was my own voice, breathing, panicked, whispering words I didn't remember saying. Don't open the door, it's already inside. Before I could react, the lights flickered once, twice, then died completely. The darkness that followed wasn't just absence of light, it felt thick, oppressive, swallowing sound and sense alike. I heard something move across the floor, slow, dragging, deliberate. My grip on the bat tightened until my knuckles ached. Then, from somewhere deep in that suffocating dark, came the faint, distorted sound of my own voice again. Not from the phone this time, but from the corner of the room. You should have kept walking. Gestures, I tried to explain, but there was no one to hear me, no one to explain to. The car in front of me started moving slowly, then stopped again. Its driver's side door opened, a shadow slipping out without a sound, moving with a fluidity that made my stomach knot. The shadow approached my car, deliberate, measured, and I could see the faint outline of something not quite human in its posture, too long-limbed, too straight, and yet undeniably upright. My hands tightened on the wheel. The air inside my car grew heavier, thicker, as if it had weight. My pulse thundered. It stopped at my window, just outside, looking in. No face, exactly, just a suggestion of features, smoothed and wrong in the way that reflection in the black phone screen had been. And then realized the voice I'd heard on the intercom hadn't been from a human. It hadn't been a recording either. It had been this. The shadow leaned close to the glass, and I could feel the heat emanating, not from its body, but from somewhere inside my own chest, where the second heartbeat had started weeks ago. The voice spoke again, clear, precise, and entirely alien. You know what we want. You always do. I wanted to drive away, to scream, to run, but the accelerator felt glued beneath my foot. the steering wheel like it belonged to someone else. The shadow moved alongside the car, impossible speed, matching every motion I made. Staying perfectly aligned, the world outside the windows seemed to stretch and warp. Neon signs flickered in strange sequences. The desert horizon bending unnaturally, like reality itself was conforming to its presence. Then the voice again, but this time in my head, overlapping with my own thoughts. Orders must be correct. Patience is measured attention, taken, and the collection continues. The car behind honked again. The sound sounded far away, muffled, like it existed in a different plane than the one I occupied. I realized I couldn't leave, not yet. Not until whatever had been orchestrating this through the phone, through the restaurant, through the shadows and reflections, decided I could die. Looked at the empty pickup window, at the monitor glowing blue, the headset dangling, and the smell of fryer oil still clinging to the air. Everything perfectly ordinary, and yet, I knew with absolute certainty, this was never about food. It had never been about food. The shadow leaned in closer, pressing its impossibility against my reality, and I finally understood the rule. It waits, it watches, and it only moves when you notice it. The second heartbeat, the wrong reflections, the carved warnings. This was the same presence, persistent, patient, guiding, collecting, and now it had me in its sights. I gripped the steering wheel, waiting not for it to leave, but for the next instruction, because I knew, deep down, there would always be another order. Earth brake lights flicked off. The car didn't drive away, it just sat there, engine running. Faint vibration trembling through the still air. No door opened, no window rolled down, no motion at all. I stared at the red glow on the pavement, expecting them to reverse, to honk, to do something. They didn't. A flicker of movement drew my eyes back to the interior. The shadows were no longer content with the corners. They'd thickened, coalesced into faint, almost human silhouettes, moving behind the counter. The lights pulsed faster now, synchronized with something unseen. The car at the window still hadn't moved, and I realized I couldn't see the driver anymore, not clearly. Anyway, the windshield was dark, reflecting the building's sickly glow, instead of showing anything inside. Then the voice spoke again, not from the speaker this time, but from everywhere, from the open air, from the glass, from the hum of the electrical grid itself. Order received. My breath caught. The car at the window lurched forward a few inches, then stopped abruptly. The headlights flickered once, twice, and went out. I could hear the faint whine of metal, like the sound of pressure being applied somewhere it shouldn't. Then the car began to sink, not fast, not like collapsing, more like being swallowed. The tires sank first, disappearing into the asphalt as if it were liquid. Then the chassis, the roof, the antenna, all descending smoothly, silently, until the car was gone. The pavement rippled once, then smoothed. A parking lot again, untouched. My first instinct was to run, to get in my car, drive. Anything but my hands wouldn't obey. Something inside me understood that motion would draw attention. The voice hadn't spoken to me yet, and I didn't want it to. I sat absolutely still, listening from the speaker. Static hissed softly, then words began to form, half buried in the noise. Next order ready. The pulse of the lights quickened. The front door, still locked, rattled once. Just a test, like something on the other side checking the resistance. I couldn't see what it was, but I could feel its attention, like being studied through glass. The shadows had stopped moving now, all gathered in a line behind the counter, as though waiting to survive. Don't remember unlocking my door. I just remember standing in the heat. The smell of fryer oil stronger now, metallic somehow, like something burning that shouldn't. The hum of the building deepened, a low note I could feel in my teeth. The speaker crackled again, gentle, almost kind. Please, pull forward to the first window. I shook my head no. My voice came out small, absurd against the vast stillness. Please, it said, softer now, the word drawn out. Tender. We can't begin until you pull forward. Something behind the glass smiled, not a face. Exactly, just the suggestion of one. The curve of light in the wrong place. My car keys felt heavy in my hand. The air itself seemed to lean toward me. Backed away, step by step, until I reached my car. The world outside the restaurant had gone strangely silent. No other vehicles, no wind, no sound, but that hum, that breath, the whisper of static from the speaker repeating endlessly now. Please pull forward, please pull forward, please pull forward. I drove. I didn't look back until I was miles away, when I finally allowed myself to breathe in the rearview mirror. The horizon glowed faintly red, where the restaurant had been on, beneath the noise of the road, beneath the drone of tires and engine. I could still hear it, the faint hiss of a drive-through speaker order received efficient, utterly human. Yet, I realized with growing unease that it wasn't one of the employees speaking. It was the same voice I'd heard before outside. When no one had been visible behind the counter, the sound filled the restaurant like warm air, wrapping around us, vibrating in the fluorescent hum. Welcome back, it said, cheerful and mechanical. What can I get started for you today? The employees turned in unison, their movements perfectly timed. No hesitation, each went to a station, grills, fryers, drink dispensers, resuming work, as though the night had never happened, as though the world outside existed only in cycles between their orders. The manager approached me. Their smile didn't change, but the eyes didn't. If they could be called eyes anymore, not glowing, not hollow, just repeating. I saw my own reflection inside them, faint but infinite, like looking down an endless tunnel of mirrors. They gestured toward the kitchen. You'll get used to it. They said it was the first time I'd heard any of them speak. The voice was calm, reassuring, the kind of tone you'd use to explain a simple procedure. Everyone does. Eventually, the name tag in my hand grew heavier. As if responding to the words, I looked down at it again, at the letters of my name, and realized the plastic wasn't smooth anymore beneath the surface. Faint movement like veins shifting under translucent skin. I dropped it. It didn't fall. It stuck to my hand, clinging like static or suction. Refusing to release, I tried pulling it off with my other hand, but both hands froze, mid-motion, muscles locking as though the signal to move had been intercepted somewhere. The manager's smile widened. Pleased, clock in, they said gently. Something in the air pulsed, a low, rhythmic vibration, like a heartbeat too large for one body to contain. The digital timer on the wall began counting again, resetting from 10 o'clock, but this time, it didn't count down, it counted up. One of the employees handed me a headset. It fit perfectly, like it had been molded for me. A soft chime played in my ear, followed by the familiar tone of the drive-through alert. Order ready, the voice whispered, not through the headset, but inside it, as if the voice itself lived in the circuitry. Turned toward the window. The first car of the morning rush waited, their windows tinted, engine idling. A normal customer, a normal order. I reached for the microphone. My hand moved. Before I told it to my lips, formed words. I didn't choose good morning, I said, voice smooth and automatic. Welcome to. I paused. The restaurant's name flickered on the wall display, glitching between letters, unreadable symbols, rearranging themselves faster than the eye could track. How can I take your order? The line crackled. A voice replied, casual, half awake, unaware. Yeah, can I get a sausage biscuit combo with a large coffee? My mouth smiled. My hands typed the order into the terminal. The motions were precise, natural, effortless. Behind me, the employees were already moving, synchronized in that same perfect rhythm. The manager watched from the counter, hands folded, approving, and as the scent of breakfast filled the air, I realized I could no longer remember what my own voice used to sound like, only the one that greeted customers. Steady and bright outside, the sun rose higher, cars kept coming, and every time someone pulled up to the speaker, the system spoke before I did. Welcome back, it said. What can I get started for you today? That should have reassured me, but didn't. There was no weapon there, no radio, no handcuffs, nothing. Just the motion, the pantomime of authority. My instincts screamed no, but fear is a strange negotiator. It can make disobedience feel more dangerous than compliance, so I did what he said. The night air pressed close, heavy with the scent of pine and something metallic. Underneath, the sound of cicadas had stopped. The forest was holding its breath. The officer, or whatever he was, stepped back to give me space. The flashlight now trained on my chest, not my face. "Pop the trunk," he said. The phrasing was casual, conversational even, but my pulse spiked. "Why?" I asked. He tilted his head. The beam of the flashlight wobbled slightly, as though he were studying the word itself. The question then, in that same calm voice, he repeated, "Pop the trunk." I turned slowly toward my car, hands visible, every nerve on fire. The key fob trembled in my grip when I pressed the button. The trunk clicked open with a sound that felt too loud to final. The officer moved past me, the flashlight bobbing. I could see his silhouette in the rear glow of my taillight stall, wrong, bending in ways the human spine doesn't. I heard him shuffle something in the trunk, metal sliding against metal, though I knew there was nothing in there but a suitcase and a half-empty bottle of windshield fluid. Then came the sound, soft, wet, like fabric tearing underwater. He stood upright again, holding something I couldn't identify. It was small, pale, and trembling in his hand. He looked at it, then at me, and smiled with a kind of satisfaction that didn't belong on any human face. "This will do," he said quietly. He dropped it onto the ground. It made no sound when it hit the dirt. I took a step back. "I don't know what this is," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "But I'm leaving." He nodded. "Yes," he said. "You will." I turned, got back in the car, and slammed the lock button. The engine started on the first try this time, like it wanted to help me escape. The officer didn't follow. He just stood in the glow of his blue light, which had shifted now slower, softer, almost pulsing in time with my heart beat as I drove off. The light faded behind me. I tried to shake it off, to rationalize what I'd seen. Maybe exhaustion, maybe stress, maybe I'd finally lost the thread of reality after too many sleepless nights. But 20 minutes later, when I turned onto Route 6 to bypass a construction detour, I saw it again. The same car, the same single blue light, parked on the shoulder, and standing beside it, illuminated by that sickly pulse, was Mayhew. It was holding up a flashlight. My face, my uniform, my expression, perfectly copied. The radio crackled from my dashboard before I could touch it. "Driver," the voice said, my own voice, "please step out of the vehicle." Notice in the moment the unnatural tilt of his head, the way his uniform seemed slightly wrong, the soft mechanical hum that had come from his vehicle. Every one of them suggested design, intention, a pattern I hadn't been able to see while in flight. My body had reacted, had obeyed without analysis, but now my mind began cataloging the inconsistencies, connecting dots I couldn't have articulated while terror gripped me. The blue light, the click of the not-quite radio, the thermos-like object he'd carried, it all pointed towards something more than a simple roadside ambush. Someone had studied me, someone had prepared the trackers, the improvised vehicle, the uncanny simulation of authority. They weren't random, and somehow it felt connected to the other experiences that had haunted me lately. The reflection in the black screen, the phone calls, the drive-through restaurant that had never been truly empty. Even the police officer's presence now seemed to offer only a temporary reprieve. A thin membrane of normality stretched over the impossible. I kept replaying the moment I accelerated, the figure raising his hand, the strobe fading into darkness. It wasn't a chase. Not exactly. It was an observation, a test, a signal that even when I thought I'd escaped, someone or something knew where I was and how I moved. I sat in the living room for hours after the police left. Lights harsh and unblinking, doors locked, windows secured. The rational part of me wanted to sleep, to reset the adrenaline, to pretend this had been a freakish, isolated event. But the deeper part, the one that remembered the unnatural rhythm in that vehicle, the wrongness of his posture, the way he'd held the object close to his chest as though it were sacred, knew that I hadn't yet seen the full picture and then I noticed a tiny green light, pulsing softly from the corner of the room where I hadn't been paying attention. A light that hadn't been there before, small, discreet, almost imperceptible, but unmistakably present, the same institutional green I remembered from that crosswalk signal months ago. The color of screens and orders, of transactions completed and lives quietly shifted. Realized then, with a chill that crawled under my skin and lodged in my chest, that escaping the roadside ambush hadn't freed me. Whoever or whatever was orchestrating these events had ways to reach me, to follow, to mark, to manipulate, and the quiet realization settled into my mind like ice water. I had not survived a single encounter. I had merely been allowed to continue participating somewhere in the city, in the streets, in the fluorescent light of fast food restaurants, in the pulse of traffic signals, in the flat professionalism of voices over phone lines. The game was still ongoing, and now I understood, fully and irrevocably, that the moment I thought I was alone, I had been watched, and I always would. Beady green light pulsed again, my phone vibrated in tandem, and I knew, without reaching for it, that the screen would show a call from a number I didn't recognize. A call I could not ignore, because ignoring it would not end the sequence, it would only let it begin that Thursday. The air in the building felt heavier than usual, muggy, oppressive, as if the walls themselves were exhaling heat. I remember because the moment I stepped into the lobby, I could feel it pressing down on me. Thick and stale, the elevator was, of course, out of order again. So I started climbing the stairs. When I reached Daniel's floor, I noticed a faint glow bleeding out from under his door. It was subtle at first, just enough to make me pause. My brain supplied a dozen mundane explanations. A candle, a TV, maybe the reflection of a passing car. But the glow didn't move or flicker, it pulsed. Knocked. Lightly at first, then harder. Daniel, you left a light on. No answer. The glow intensified, deepening from orange to an unsettling, liquid red that didn't seem to belong to any normal light source. I took a step back. The hairs on my arms lifting. The air smelled faintly of ozone and something else, not smoke exactly, but hot metal, like an iron left face down to long before I could decide whether to get help or kick the door in. It opened on its own with a slow, deliberate creak inside. Daniel's apartment was dim except for the corners, each one, the ceiling junctions, the space behind furniture, even the narrow gap between the fridge and the wall, glowed faintly, like embers buried beneath translucent ash. The light bent wrong, as if it were leaking from cracks in the geometry of the room itself. Daniel, I called again. My voice sounded too loud, swallowed by the humming air. Then I saw him. He was sitting cross-legged in the middle of the floor, his eyes open but glassy, reflecting those same shifting hues that burned in the corners. His lips moved, forming words I couldn't quite hear, something rhythmic and deliberate, like a prayer or a chant. The temperature rose. The longer I stood there, sweat rolled down my neck. I took a cautious step inside. That's when the nearest corner flared, a sudden, violent burst of color, like someone had struck a match in oil. It didn't spread along the wall or catch on the curtains. It just expanded outward, a blooming sphere of light that touched nothing but still made me stagger back from the force of it. Daniel didn't flinch. He kept murmuring, "Faster now." I yelled his name and reached for him, but the floor beneath my feet felt soft, not carpet soft, unstable, like stepping on something that wasn't meant to hold weight. The air began to ripple, and the hum deepened into a low roar that seemed to come from everywhere at once, from the building, from the corners, from inside my head. Then, as suddenly as it started, it stopped. The light died, the air cooled, the corners returned to shadow. Daniel was gone, not collapsed, not burned, just gone. The space where he'd been sitting was perfectly clean, except for a small circular scorch mark on the hardwood, about the size of a dinner plate. The fire department said there was no sign of combustion. The police took a report, shrugged at the lack of evidence, and eventually filed it as a missing person case. The landlord replaced the door and re-rented the unit within 2 months, but the new tenants didn't stay long a week. Maybe 10 days. I'd hear them arguing late at night about the lights, about how the air in the apartment seemed to breathe, then they'd be gone, leaving behind the same scorch mark on the floor no one could sand out. That was months ago. The building's still standing, barely. Most of us pretend not to notice the faint glow that crawls along the stairwell corners after midnight, or the smell of hot metal. When the radiators aren't running, I don't go near Daniel's old floor anymore. But sometimes, when I'm trying to sleep, I see the light through the crack beneath my door, a dim, orange pulse. Slow, patient questions I hadn't thought to ask when they might have mattered by February. The apartment building felt alive in ways I couldn't rationalize. Not alive, like a home full of people or warmth, but aware. The shadows shifted too deliberately. The creaks in the floor too patterned. I'd catch myself hesitating at corners in the hallways, feeling as if something might be waiting just beyond my line of sight. And sometimes, when the heat from the radiators mingled with the smell of something faintly electrical, I thought I could see a flicker in the corners, like a miniature flame that didn't burn, just existed. Started keeping a journal, mostly to convince myself I wasn't losing my mind. I documented the hours, the smells, the flashes of light I noted, the times the new tenant's apartment glowed, faintly in patterns that corresponded with my own observations. And there were nights when I would swear I could see Daniel's face in the reflections of my own windows, pale and staring, mouthing words I couldn't hear, or perhaps had never been spoken. One evening in March, I woke to the metallic taste again, sharp and bitter in my mouth. I followed it instinctively to the stairwell, moving barefoot over cold tiles. The corner outside Daniel's old unit flickered. The light wasn't bright, it was subtle, almost apologetic, but it pulsed, as if breathing. And then I realized it was watching me, just as I had been watching Daniel months before. I didn't touch the wall, I didn't try to step closer. I just let myself feel the presence, as small and insistent as a heartbeat. Over time, I stopped asking why the flames, if they were flames, weren't a puzzle to solve. They were a pattern, a signal, a presence that existed independently of human understanding. I learned to read them in the small, quiet hours of the building's night, noting their rhythm and the way they moved. The metallic hum that had become constant under my feet seemed to sync with them, vibrating along with each flicker in the corner's eye. Don't know if Daniel ever truly left. I don't know if he simply stopped noticing, or if something inside the apartment claimed him entirely. All I know is that the building has rules, and it chooses when and how to reveal itself. And now, I pay attention. I watch the corners. I track the subtle shifts in shadows and light. I sleep lightly, always aware of the hum beneath my feet. Some nights, I still smell the acrid temps of burnt insulation. Some nights, I still see the orange flickers, just at the edge of my vision, pulsing faintly, insistently. And some nights, I think I hear Daniel's voice, faint and distant, counting or praying, guiding me to look closer, teaching me to notice what others walk past. The building waits. It has always been waiting, and now I wait with it. Warn us. I hadn't listened, and now I was awake to it, a reluctant witness to the building's secret life. March passed in a haze of sleepless nights, coffee, and long walks through shadowed hallways. Every creak, every whisper of wind through the old window seals, every flutter of heat along a baseboard made me pause. I began taking notes, sketching diagrams of corners where the shimmers sometimes appeared, documenting times and conditions. Patterns emerged, or at least I thought they did. The orange glow seemed stronger on nights with high humidity, or when the building's pipes rattled in a certain rhythm. I wasn't sure if it was coincidence or causality, but it didn't matter. Observing it became a ritual, a way to exert control over something that defied reason. One night, I found myself in Daniel's old apartment. It had been empty for weeks, the furniture removed, the walls freshly painted. The air smelled of primer and new carpeting, neutral and clean. Yet, as I stood in the middle of the living room, I felt it, the presence I'd felt in the corners. Subtle but insistent. The faint, acrid temps of electricity. The heat that seemed to radiate from nowhere. Just at the junctions where walls met ceiling, I walked slowly around the room, hands tracing the air above me, feeling for the shimmer that had haunted my dreams. Nothing moved, nothing burned, but I knew it was there, waiting. Patient, I realized then that the building didn't reveal itself to everyone. It didn't need to. It didn't care. Daniel had been chosen. I had been chosen. And others would pass by, oblivious. The shimmer, the flicker, the faint pulse of heat, they existed on a frequency most couldn't perceive. And maybe that was mercy. Maybe ignorance was a kind of protection. I left the apartment and locked the door behind me. Lingering in the hallway, the building was quiet, but not silent. The pipes hummed, the floors whispered, the shadows pooled in corners, and then dispersed. Almost in time with my heartbeat, I understood something fundamental. This was not a haunted building in any conventional sense. It was aware, alive in a way that didn't need faces, or voices, or intentions. It simply was, and it selected its observers carefully, feeding on attention, curiosity, and fear. When I returned to my own apartment, I made one unspoken agreement with myself. I would watch, I would document, but I would not let it consume me. There was a rhythm to these things, a pattern that could be studied and respected without surrendering entirely. I would remain awake, alert, but not terrified. I would learn its habits, as one studies the tides, and accept that some things cannot be explained, only acknowledged. Daniel had tried to teach me to see. I hadn't understood at first. Now I did, and in that understanding, I found a strange kind of peace, even if it was edged with the sharp temps of electricity and the faint, unplaceable scent of something burning just beyond perception. The building waited, yes, but now I waited with it, aware, vigilant, awakening slow. Lazy circles through the heavy air, the timing pressed at the edges of my consciousness, and a thought I couldn't shake began to coil in my chest. What if the presence I'd felt behind the couch wasn't corporeal at all? What if it had been tied to the moment of Aunt Diane's passing? I sat down heavily, heart still hammering, and tried to untangle the sequence. The uncanny coincidence gnawed at me, the exact time, the precise feeling of someone or something looming over me. Not a shadow, not a reflection, not a trick of light, but a weight, a force, and it had arrived at the instant she left the world. My rational mind tried to dismiss it. Air currents, nerves, coincidence, yet my spine wouldn't be fooled. It remembered. I spent the rest of the afternoon in a suspended vigilance, watching corners, listening for the hum of pipes, the subtle changes in the air. The fan rotated overhead. Indifferent, I checked the room repeatedly, fingers trailing along the couch's fabric, along the backs of chairs, around door frames. Nothing was there, or at least, nothing material, and yet the sensation lingered, persistent and intimate, like a message left in the atmosphere for someone attuned enough to perceive it. That night, I slept fitfully, half expecting the figure to return, not as a threat, necessarily, but as a presence, acknowledging the shift, marking the boundary between life and death, between perception and the unseen. And when I finally drifted, the last image in my mind was of Aunt Diane's familiar house in Pittsburgh. Steep stairs and faded wallpaper, bathed in the golden late afternoon sun, yet resonating with an echo I couldn't name. A presence that had brushed past me without form, without warning, and left the room subtly. Irrevocably changed it, became another pattern, another layer in the growing understanding that the world was never as empty as it seemed, that attention, timing, and awareness could reveal forces just beyond our comprehension, forces that could appear at a ceiling fan's rotation, in a room's corner, in the briefest flicker of heat or light, and touch us in ways the mind can neither fully explain nor completely forget. Close enough to see the slow rise and fall of my own chest, close enough to smell my shampoo, to feel the heat radiating from the body that was me, but wasn't. I wanted to reach out, to shake myself awake, to prove that I was real. that this was only a dream, but my hand wouldn't move. It hovered inches above my shoulder, trembling, as if pressing through a barrier made of air so thick it resisted intrusion. Then the sleeping version of me opened its eyes. They didn't open suddenly, like in a startle. They opened slowly, deliberately aware, expectant, and when they did, they were already looking directly at me, at the me that was standing there. There was no shock in that gaze, no confusion, just calm recognition, like it had been waiting. My reflection, my other self, smiled, small and crooked, and whispered something I couldn't hear. I woke, gasping. My sheets tangled around me, the taste of static in my mouth. The clock on my nightstand read 2:52 a.m. I didn't move for a long time. The apartment was silent, but dense with presence, that thick, watchful quiet that fills a space right after a noise you didn't quite register. I turned on the lamp. The light cast the room in soft amber, but the shadows didn't retreat the way they should have. They clung to the corners, as if drawn to the edges of the walls. I got up, my bare feet cold on the floorboards, and checked every door again, closed, latched still. Something felt wrong with the air, the temperature uneven, a faint draft where there shouldn't have been one. I stood in front of the mirror above my dresser and looked at myself. Pale skin, tired eyes, hair sticking up from restless sleep. Ordinary, but the reflection didn't blink when I did. It was subtle at first, just half a second of lag, then it smiled again. That same small, knowing smile from the dream. I froze. My throat went dry slowly, deliberately. I raised my right hand. The reflection raised its left, as expected. But a fraction too late. I told myself it was exhaustion, the mind's tendency to hallucinate in the gray spaces between waking and sleep. I turned away. Behind me, glass whispered the faint, unmistakable sound of fingernails tracing across a mirror's surface. That was when I unplugged every lamp, every appliance, and slept with the lights from the street spilling through my blinds. It didn't help the next morning. There were faint smudges on the mirror's surface, not fingerprints exactly, but streaks, like condensation dragged by unseen hands. I cleaned them off with glass spray, scrubbing until my reflection looked ordinary again. Then I caught sight of something not in the mirror, but behind me, in the narrow space between the bedroom door and the wall. A figure, not distinct, not solid, just a silhouette, darker than the darkness around it, watching when I turned. The space was empty. That was 2 nights ago. I haven't slept since. The air in the apartment feels heavier now, charged, as if the walls are holding their breaths. Sometimes, when I close my eyes, I feel movement, not near me, but through me, like my body is a hallway something else is learning to walk through. And every night, without fail, at 2:52, I feel it again, a soft warmth at the back of my neck, the ghost of a breath not my own, and the certainty that whatever stands behind me isn't waiting to harm me. It's waiting for me to turn around. Then the doors started slamming. At first, it was just one, the bathroom, swinging closed with a force that rattled the latch. I froze in the kitchen, coffee cup halfway to my lips, listening to the echoing thump against the empty hallway. My mind ran through explanations. Draft, uneven floorboards. But the apartment had been meticulously checked. Nothing should move on its own. And yet, the sound repeated. Another door, the bedroom this time, then the closet in the hall, each slam precise, almost deliberate, as though timed to be heard. To make me aware, I stopped drinking my coffee. The mug cooled, forgotten, as I watched the hallway. Shadows pooled at the edges of the rooms, darkening where the light didn't reach. The apartment smelled faintly of lavender again, but beneath it was that other scent, stale, almost decayed. I tried speaking, even laughing, hoping my voice might anchor the reality around me. It's just the building settling, I said aloud, though the words felt hollow in the stillness. I went door to door, checking the locks, feeling the metal handles under my fingers. Each one was tight, secure, exactly where it should be. Nothing was disturbed, nothing moved, except the memory of the noise. I returned to the living room, pacing slowly, waiting for the next slam. The apartment had become an instrument tuned to attention. The more I listened, The more responsive it became, a floorboard creaked behind me, and I jumped the light above the couch. Shifted, shadows stretching unnaturally long. I dared not sit. Every surface felt surveilled, claimed over the following nights. The pattern intensified. Doors, drawers, even cabinets responded to my presence sometimes. They only moved when I glanced away, as though the apartment waited for me to lower my guard. Other times, a slight touch would provoke a reaction. The refrigerator hummed shifting pitch, the oven ticking when not in use, the bathroom faucet dripping as though anticipating my approach. I stopped sleeping. Each hour awake was spent mapping the apartment's behavior, noting which areas were most reactive, testing the thresholds of movement. My notes filled a small notebook, pages curling from repeated handling. I tried to rationalize mechanical failure, thermal expansion, building quirks, but the behavior defied patterns. It wasn't random. It was responsive. Something in the apartment knew. And then I noticed the corners again, every junction where walls met ceiling, every nook near door frames, every shadowed space seemed to pulse faintly in the periphery of vision, as though aware of my gaze when I stared directly. Nothing happened, but when I allowed my attention to wander, a subtle vibration, a low hum, would appear, resonating beneath my feet and rising into my chest. The shadows became more than absence of light. They thickened, coalescing along baseboards and corners, forming shapes just at the edge of recognition. I thought of Rebecca's words. The ribbon of darkness beneath the door. The memory made my skin crawl. I tried recording video, but the camera captured nothing but empty rooms. The phenomenon existed only in perception, at the boundary between seeing and knowing. One night, around 2:14 a.m., the apartment escalated. The slams came in rapid succession. Bathroom, bedroom, kitchen, living room. I had learned to anticipate the rhythm, to move slowly and deliberately. But that night, it broke. The doors began to slam without pause, a barrage of sound reverberating off the brick and metal, rattling the windows. I pressed my palms to my ears, heart hammering. The hum in the floor became a roar, vibrating my teeth, and then it stopped abruptly. Silence swallowed the space. I dared to breathe. Then I heard it, a soft exhale, close behind me, not the ordinary drafty sigh of a building, but deliberate, intentional, almost human. My body locked, my mind flaring with panic. Slowly, I turned. The living room was empty, everything in its place, but the air felt dense, heavy, as if filled with a presence pressing against it. My eyes were drawn to the corners for the first time. I saw movement, a ripple along the baseboard, faint but real, like heat shivering across metal. A shadow pulled there, thickening, forming the outline of something vaguely humanoid. Backed away, heart racing. The object didn't advance, it didn't flee. It waited, observed the air between us, thrummed with attention, a tactile weight pressing against my skin. I realized then that the apartment wasn't haunted in the traditional sense. It wasn't trying to harm, it was communicating, expressing itself, measuring my responses, feeding on my awareness. I was the stimulus, and it was alive. In reaction, sleep became impossible. Days blended into night's work. Friends, food, all faded into the background of constant vigilance. Every visit to the apartment revealed new behavior. Furniture shifted subtly when I approached. Light patterns distorted. Shadows bent unnaturally. I realized then that it wasn't the apartment alone. I carried something from Rebecca, something transmissible, a sensitivity awakened by proximity, attention, empathy. Wherever I went, the responsiveness persisted, if diminished months later. I moved a smaller unit downtown. Concrete walls, fewer corners. I hoped distance might sever the link, that the apartment's influence was limited to its own walls. But on the first night, around 2:47 a.m., the experience returned. A door moved slightly, a floorboard creaked, shadows lengthened. I understood then that the phenomenon had followed me, or perhaps had never left. The moment of recognition, of connection, had tethered may live now in perpetual observation. measuring light and sound, noting the angles and shapes in every room. Ordinary life continues around me, unremarkable and oblivious, but I know better presence lingers in spaces once touched by awareness, even absence, and every night, when the world slumbers, I feel it, subtle, patient, observing, waiting for me to drift, so that it may reach out once more, because once a place awakens, once perception is shared, there is no returning, and I have seen it. The days grew longer, but the nights remained impossibly weighted. I tried to normalize life, work, errands, the occasional social call, but every routine, every familiar task, carried the undercurrent of presence. I learned to anticipate the apartment's subtle cues, a shadow slightly too dense, a draft against bare skin, the faint vibration underfoot. I could almost map its moods, agitation when I ignored it, calm when I acknowledged its existence, curiosity when I lingered in certain corners. It had personality, preference, awareness. I would speak to it aloud, softly, almost ritualistically, explaining where I was going, what I intended to do, apologizing when I moved objects or changed furniture arrangements. The apartment did not answer, but the atmosphere shifted. The shadows softened, the vibrations ebbed. Recognition, acknowledgement, that seemed to be enough. Friends noticed changes in me, concern in their eyes, gentle inquiries about sleep, diet, stress. I brushed it off, using stress, grief, in a demanding schedule as cover. I could not tell them the truth. To explain the apartment would be to invite disbelief, ridicule, or worse, curiosity that might awaken it further. It was a private entity now, a companion of darkness, an angle and corner, bound to my awareness and my life in ways I did not understand and could not escape. Months became a year. The apartment settled into a rhythm with me. It would not attack, not interfere violently, but it would make its presence known when I strayed from awareness. And still, around 2:52, 2:55 a.m. each night, I felt it most acutely, the hum in the floor, the subtle shifting of shadows. The edges of perception bending. The time had become a marker, a tether, the hour when attention mattered most. I no longer attempted to sleep through it. Instead, I watched, waited, learned. I read, wrote, and studied the spaces around me, treating every shadow, every reflective surface, every corner as part of a living system, a sentient topology. I realized that my own awareness, sharpened and unrelenting, was part of the bond. Without it, nothing moved with it. The apartment stirred, alive in quiet response, and, though I moved later to another building, far from the one in Seattle, far from Rebecca's apartment, the rhythm persists, the late-night awareness, the subtle gestures, the feeling of being watched. It is a shadow tethered to me, not the rooms themselves, a lesson I learned too late. Once perception awakens something, the bond is never broken. Once attention reaches it, it reaches back. The apartment, the shadow, the presence, whatever it was, followed me, and I am left to live in careful observation, aware that the ordinary walls and objects of daily life may no longer be empty, may no longer be mine alone. 2:52 a.m. The clock ticks forward. I do not sleep. The Hollywood freeway had a particular smell at dusk, exhaust fumes, mixing with something sweet and rotten from the drainage channels running beneath the concrete. I'd driven this route for 3 years, commuting between sets, studio lots, and temporary apartments. It had become muscle memory. The exit signs, the rhythm of brake lights, the way the sun burned through smog and turned everything the color of rust that evening. Traffic was lighter than usual. A strange quiet settled over the lanes, as though the city had exhaled and forgotten to inhale again. The radio crackled but didn't quite tune into any station. I rolled down the window for air, but the smell of asphalt and heat rose like something living. At first, I thought I was imagining it, the figure standing on the overpass railing near the barroom. Exit people sometimes climbed there to take photos, or worse, but this one didn't move. No phone in hand, no gesture, no sound, Just stillness. The head turned slightly as I passed beneath, and for a moment, I had the distinct, physical certainty that its eyes tracked me. I didn't see a face, just the pale oval of one, featureless in the dimming light. By the time I reached the next exit, I'd convinced myself it was nothing, a trick of distance and sun glare. I went home, a rented apartment near Franklin and Cahuenga, the kind of place where every sound carried through thin walls. My neighbor, Elise, an actress between jobs, greeted me through the open window as she smoked weed, shared cigarettes, late-night wine. The occasional conversation about films neither of us would ever make. She asked if I'd heard about the body they'd found near the freeway earlier that week. A woman, maybe homeless. Maybe not. I hadn't. She laughed, the way people do when the subject unsettles them, but they want to seem unaffected. That stretch of road eats people, she said, always has that night. Sleep came in fragments. I woke around 2 a.m. to the faint sound of a car idling outside my window. When I looked, the street was empty. The light from the billboard across the intersection pulsed faintly. Pure California sunsets. An advertisement for bottled water. The figure from the overpass lingered in my mind. I tried to replace it with logic, with rational images. The next morning, I found black smudges on my car's hood, as though someone with ash or soot on their hands had touched it in several places. Finger marks. I wiped them off, but the outline remained faintly visible, an oily residue. Over the next week, I began seeing the figure again, not always clearly, but always at a distance, near underpasses, in parking garages, at the edge of my vision. When I merged into traffic, always still, always watching. Once, I saw it reflected in the glass door of my building, but when I turned, the street behind me was empty. Stopped driving the freeway, took surface roads instead, but the figure adapted, appearing at crosswalks, at intersections, even once in the reflection of my rearview mirror. When I parked outside the grocery store, I could never describe its face, but the shape, the posture, those were burned into me. Lise noticed my nerves. She joked that Hollywood paranoia was contagious. You start thinking everyone's watching you, and eventually someone is. That evening, I dreamed I was back on the freeway. The traffic had stopped completely. Every car was empty, doors open, engines running. The air smelled thick with gasoline and decay. The figure stood in the middle of the road this time, closer than ever, its head tilting in slow, unnatural increments. It raised one hand and pointed at me. When I woke, my window was open. My car alarm was going off in the street below. I haven't driven since last night. Elise knocked on my door, asking if I'd seen a man standing in the alley behind our building. He was looking up at my window. She said I wanted to tell her not to look, not to acknowledge him, but the words felt heavy. Trapped this morning. She didn't answer her phone. Her door was locked. The landlord says she moved out overnight, left the keys in the mailbox. No forwarding address. I don't believe that. From my kitchen window, I can see the freeway in the distance at dusk. When the light turns orange and the air hums, I can make out something small but unmistakable, standing on the overpass railing again, watching the traffic, watching me. Sometimes I think it's not a person at all. Sometimes I think it's an idea that attaches to whoever notices it long enough, like a role that keeps finding new actors. I don't drive anymore, but I still hear the engines when I try to sleep, thousands of them, revving endlessly somewhere below the city, waiting for the next person to look up. While passing under the overpass at dusk, the officer nodded without looking up, his flashlight tracing the scratches along the door panel. You'd be surprised how many people do that. He said, get into it with someone on the freeway. Half the city's a pressure cooker. One wrong look, one bad merge, and they lose it. He stood, brushing his hands on his uniform pants. You're lucky. Could have been a lot worse. I told you there was a woman in the passenger seat, I said. She looked terrified, like she wanted out. He glanced at me, the beam of his flashlight briefly catching my eyes. Maybe she was scared of him. Maybe they were fighting hard to say you got the plate. I shook my head. Too much movement, too fast. He sighed. Without a plate, There's not much to go on. I'll file the report. But his tone implied the ending before he said it. These things rarely go anywhere. He handed me a card. His name was Ortiz. The address at the bottom read California Highway Patrol, Hollywood Division call, if you remember anything else. He said then he drove off, leaving me in the quiet street with the smell of exhaust and jacaranda, and something else, faint but distinct, that sweet, fermented raw taginai. Didn't drive home right away. I sat there, engine off, watching the street until the sky began to lighten. The world felt thinner somehow, as though the distance between normal and something else had shrunk while I wasn't paying attention. When I finally got home, I parked on the street instead of in the garage. I couldn't bring myself to look at the car again. The smell clung to me, followed me up the stairs, seeped into the apartment. I showered twice, but it lingered in my nose, behind my eyes. By the next morning, a layer of dust had formed over the car's hood, the kind that collects overnight in Los Angeles from a mix of pollen, ash, and invisible pollution. Someone had traced a shape into it with a fingertip. 3 interlocking circles, uneven but deliberate. I wiped it away quickly, pretending I hadn't seen it that night. I dreamed of the woman from the SUV. She was sitting in the passenger seat again, but the driver was gone. She stared through the windshield with her mouth slightly open, eyes glassy, a dark liquid. That same thick, sweet-smelling stuff ran down the inside of the glass, tracing the outlines of her reflection. When I woke, my apartment smelled like a lagoon. I called Ortiz the next morning, trying to sound casual. Hey, it's the guy from last night. The freeway incident. He hesitated. Right. The road rage call. What's up? Did anyone report a black SUV? Accident? Shooting? Anything? A pause. Paper shuffled. Nothing in our system. You sure you didn't imagine the gunshots? Lot of noise out there. I didn't imagine it. Okay, another pause. Softer this time. Look, sometimes when people go through something intense, the mind fills in gaps. You're not the first person who's called in something like this. Something like what? He didn't answer that part. If you remember a plate. Call us then. He hung up that night. As I left work, I found a note under my windshield wiper. It was torn from a cheap notepad, written in uneven handwriting. Don't drive tonight. It's waiting. Gee. Turned in a full circle. Scanning the parking lot. Nothing. Only sodium lights buzzing over empty cars. I drove anyway. Habit over fear. Rationality over instinct. Halfway down the on-ramp to the 101, the smell returned. Sudden, powerful, sickly sweet, filling the cabin as though something were rotting under the seats. The air vents coughed once and died. My headlights flickered, and in the rearview mirror, just for an instant, I saw the black SUV again, not following beside me, perfectly parallel. Matching speed. There was no driver this time. The woman sat alone in the passenger seat, staring straight ahead. Her mouth was moving again. The same word. Stop. At the freeway was empty. No other headlights, no city sounds. Just the hum of the road stretching out forever, under a sky that looked too dark for dusk. I pressed the brakes. The pedal sank without resistance. SUV's window lowered an inch. That same liquid sprayed across my windshield again. Slow, deliberate, almost gentle this time. It formed the same shapes, looping, overlapping, not quite letters, not quite symbols. Then it was gone. When I finally coasted to a stop on the shoulder, shaking, my phone buzzed with a voicemail notification. No missed call, just a voicemail. The playback was faint, full of static, but beneath it, I could make out a woman's voice, hoarse, terrified. It doesn't stop, it just changes lanes. Shoulder blades. That crawling awareness you get when you know someone's focus is fixed on you, from somewhere you can't pinpoint. I caught myself glancing at the reflective surfaces in the office monitors, glass partitions, the darkened window across from my desk, expecting to see that SUV. Those shapes on the glass, reflected there. Around 3 p.m., my phone buzzed with a notification. Unknown device attempting to connect via Bluetooth. It disappeared before I could tap. IT told myself it was a glitch. Too many open connections in a crowded office. Probably just someone's earbuds nearby still. When I checked the Bluetooth list, there it was again for a fraction of a second. R4N9327. The letters and numbers hit me with that strange recognition I'd been avoiding. They were part of the same pattern that had appeared on my window when I got home that evening. The SUV was gone. Relief came first. Deep. Almost dizzying, but it didn't last. Something had changed. Again, the smell was back. Stronger this time, seeping through the walls. Like burnt sugar, mixed with plastic. I searched every corner of my apartment. The vents, the drains, even behind the refrigerator. Nothing. Then I saw at my front door. On the inside this time, a smear of that same residue across the wood. Faintly glistening, the same symbols, the same geometry, but this time, beneath the pattern, was a clear handprint smaller than mine, maybe a woman's, maybe Nodi. Backed away slowly, afraid to touch the knob. My breathing was shallow, almost silent. The hallway outside was quiet, unnaturally so, like the building itself was holding its breath. I don't remember deciding to leave. I only remember grabbing my keys, my wallet, and running down the stairs. The air in the parking garage was thick and humid, and my footsteps echoed louder than they should have. My car sat where I'd left it, the door unlocked, normally. Engine turned over immediately, but the dashboard light, the one that had always flickered faintly for months, was off now, dead. When I reversed out of the spot, my headlights passed over the concrete pillar directly behind me, and for just a second, I saw it, a shadow that wasn't mine, standing perfectly still in the space where light should have cut it. Why I didn't stop to check. I drove 4 hours, aimless, through neighborhoods I didn't know, across bridges and back again, until the fuel light came on, somewhere past midnight. I pulled into a rest stop off the highway, and just sat there. Shaking. The hum of the engine was the only sound. Damned. Then that smell again, sweet, chemical. Unmistakably 'twas inside the car. He looked in the rearview mirror. The back seat was empty, but the window, the inside of the glass, now had a new set of markings, written backward, so I could read them only from the mirror. It said, "You looked." I froze, gripping the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. The letters were clear, sharp, deliberate, as if pressed into the glass by a hand that existed outside my understanding of reality. My mind raced. Someone had to have written it, right? But the car had been locked all night. I had been alone, and yet there it was, a message meant only for me, mirrored perfectly for the reflection. The air in the car felt thicker, heavier, as though breathing itself had weight. I turned the engine off, listening. Nothing but the wind through the empty lot. But then, a whisper, not through the speakers, not mechanical, real, alive, soft, almost tender, yet impossibly wrong. "Don't leave." I yanked the keys from the ignition and stumbled out, flashlight in hand, scanning the empty lot. Nothing. The SUV, the shadow, the figures gone, but the smell clung to me, stronger than ever, like a perfume layered over roadie. Ran to the nearest gas station, the fluorescent lights burning my eyes, the scent still clinging. I told the clerk I needed a paper towel, anything to wipe the glass. My hands shook so violently, I nearly dropped the roll when I cleaned the window. The markings resisted. The words didn't disappear. They warped, twisted into something new. "Look again." I dropped the towel and stepped back. My reflection stared back at me, pale, wide-eyed, unrecognizable. I wanted to leave. I wanted to drive until the SUV disappeared from my life forever. But something inside me, that same pull, patient, insistent, wouldn't let me. Hours passed. I sat in the car, engine off, lights off, heart pounding, waiting for the next sign, the next interaction, the next impossible thing. And then I heard it, the engine low, slow, deliberate behind me. I didn't turn, I didn't look, but I knew the black SUV had returned. Its headlights didn't flash or glow, they existed like shadows themselves. The outline of the vehicle barely perceptible against the night. I thought of Rebecca, of Seattle, of the shadow that had followed her. I thought of the freeway, the bottle, the handprint, and I understood. Doesn't chase it, waits, it follows, it learns. I reached for my phone to call. 911. No signal. The engine hummed closer. I didn't move. I couldn't move, and in the rearview mirror, for the first time, I saw her, the woman from the SUV pressed against the window, mascara streaked, lips forming the same word I had read on Sunset Boulevard. Stoppy wanted to obey. I wanted to run. I wanted to do anything, but the letters on my own window glowed faintly. Mirrored, warning, commanding. You can't. The SUV stopped behind me. Its shadow touched the car like a living thing. The air smelled of sweet rot and chemical temps. The whisper returned. Closer, inhuman, yet familiar. You chose this, and then silence. I don't know how long I sat there, breathing shallowly, engine off, lights off, feeling the weight of the impossible pressing through the thin metal and glass of my car. Eventually, I drove slowly. Every instinct told me to stop, to flee, to abandon everything, but the city was empty, and the black SUV did not move. It followed, patiently, and I understood that, in this game, there were no winners, only participants, and I had already been chosen. The laughter grew more frequent after the first week, not loud, but intimate, like something meant only for me. It would come from the darkened kitchen when I was brushing my teeth, or from the balcony when the sliding door was closed tight. I told myself it was echoing sounds from the street below, mopeds, vendors, conversations in the rain, but deep down, I knew it wasn't echo. Was learning. Sometimes I'd catch it mimicking the creak of the hallway floorboards, or the chime my phone made when I received a message, but other times, it repeated sounds that had no business existing in my apartment. A woman humming, the wet rasp of breathing, the sound of footsteps behind me when I was standing perfectly still. Once, I heard my own voice. It came from the cage, just as I was dozing on the couch, my half-finished dinner sweating on the table beside me. Don't sleep, it said, my exact tone, my exact inflection. I jolted upright, heart hammering. The bird tilted its head. Don't sleep, it said again, softer now, like a suggestion. Then it laughed. That night, I covered the cage with a towel and moved it to the kitchen. The sound of rain against the balcony glass became unbearable, rhythmic and sharp. Around 3 a.m., I woke to the sound of the cage door clattering. I froze, listening. The rain had stopped, but the dripping continued, a steady patter from somewhere inside the apartment. When I turned on the light, the towel had fallen to the floor. The cage door was open. Echo was gone for 2 days. I searched the apartment. I left seeds, bits of fruit, anything to draw it out. Nothing. I began to think it had escaped through the cracked balcony window. Relief mingled with unease. The silence should have felt peaceful, but instead it felt heavy, like the air itself had grown aware. Then came the tapping. At first, it was faint on the balcony glass, rhythmic, patient. I assumed it was rain again, though the forecast said clear skies the next morning. I saw the smudges, tiny prints, not bird feet, human, like the prints of small hands pressed against the outside of the glass. I wiped them off that night. They came back, more of them, higher up. Stopped sleeping. I stopped working. The smell of rust grew stronger, metallic and wet, filling my nostrils. Even when I tried to escape to the hallway, my neighbors avoided my eyes when I passed them. The building superintendent refused to come up when I called about the water leak that didn't exist then. One night, I heard it again, my voice, from the dark kitchen. Look, it said balcony. I didn't want to. Every muscle in my body rebelled, but my legs moved anyway, pulling me toward the glass outside. Perched on the railing was Echo. Its feathers gleamed slick under the streetlight, but its beak was open, wider than it should have been, impossibly wide, and from within came a sound that wasn't laughter, wasn't mimicry, wasn't anything I could categorize. It was wet, alive, layered with whispers that almost formed words, and behind it, reflected in the glass, was a second shape, larger, taller, human, standing directly behind me. Turned, but there was no one there when I looked back. Echo was gone. The glass was clean, the prints erased, but the reflection, the one that should have shown only me, lingered half a second too long before vanishing. Now, every time I opened my mouth, I hear an echo that isn't mine. Every sound I make feels rehearsed, repeated, borrowed sometimes. When the apartment goes still, I hear the laughter again, not from a birdcage, but from the wall's end. Sometimes, when I speak, something else finishes the sentence. It started small, breaths that didn't belong to me. I'd speak, just small things, to test it, and the echo would come half a beat too late, like someone repeating what I said from the other side of a thin wall. The first full sentence came 3 nights later, was in the kitchen, lights off, standing barefoot in the spill of neon that filtered through the window. The city hummed below, scooters, sirens, laughter, all blending into that perpetual type A noise that never truly sleeps. I whispered, "Are you still here?" The reflection in the dark glass whispered back, "Are you?" I dropped the cup. I was holding it, shattered. The reflection didn't flinch after that. It began to speak, more often not, mimicking, conversing, every time I entered the kitchen. It was there in the glass, not quite synchronized with my movements anymore, its head tilted slower. Its eyes blinked at a rhythm that wasn't mine once, when I stood completely still. It smiled. That was the first time I noticed the teeth. Too many, too sharp. I covered the window with paper, tape, anything I could find, but reflections have a way of finding you. They appeared in my monitor, my phone screen, even the sheen of my coffee. Always just a few milliseconds behind, always smiling. Then came the messages. It started with one on my work laptop, a translation file that shouldn't have been touched by anyone else. When I opened it, the English text had been replaced by a single line, repeated over and over. "Come back to the balcony." I unplugged the modem, disconnected everything. The words stayed that night. I heard the tapping again, louder, faster, like knuckles rapping against glass. When I peeled back the paper I'd taped over the balcony door, I saw my reflection staring back from outside the glass, not in the glass, outside, standing where Echo had perched before it. Mouthed something I couldn't hear, so I opened the door. The air outside was heavy, metallic. The city sounds felt distant, as if I'd stepped underwater. The reflection, or whatever it was, moved closer. Though I couldn't see it step, it simply was closer. I whispered, "What do you want?" It grinned wider, the skin around its mouth stretching too far, and then, in my own voice, it said, "To trade places." My throat closed. I stumbled back, tripping over the threshold. The door slammed shut between us, or maybe I shut it. I don't know. The next morning, the paper I'd taped to the glass was gone. The glass itself was darker now, mirrored from both sides. I couldn't see through it anymore, and every surface in the apartment that could hold a reflection, everyone now showed the same thing. Not my face, but its smiling, waiting way. Can still hear Echo sometimes, not laughing anymore, just breathing way. Think it's inside the walls now, or maybe it's inside me. When the new tenant moved in, the place smelled faintly of bleach and jasmine. The landlord, a nervous man with deep-set eyes, handed her the keys without meeting her gaze. Previous tenant left in a hurry. He said didn't come back for his deposit. "You're lucky, rent's cheap." She smiled politely. "Why'd he leave?" He hesitated. "Noise, complaints, something about the walls." Then he added, almost whispering, "If anything feels wrong, just keep the curtains closed at night." The tenant's name was Hannah, a freelance translator who'd just moved from Kaohsiung. She needed quiet space to think, and she liked the way the light fell through the balcony doors in the afternoon. Soft, golden clean. The first week passed. Uneventfully, she unpacked her books, set up her desk, made tea every night. Before bed, she'd hear faint scratching from the far corner near the kitchen, but she blamed rats then. The power went out on a Thursday evening. She lit a candle and opened her laptop to check her battery. The screen flickered once, twice, and then something appeared. A folder on the desktop she hadn't created. It was titled Echo_translation_final docs. She opened it. The document contained a single paragraph, written in English. "If you're reading this, it means it found another mirror. Don't look at the balcony. Don't answer it when it speaks. It doesn't know it isn't you. Yet the cursor blinked at the end of the sentence then. As she watched, more words began to appear, one by one, as if someone were typing from the other side of the screen. "Hannah, can you hear me?" Her chest tightened. She hadn't entered her name anywhere. The reflection on her laptop screen shimmered slightly. A trick of candlelight, she told herself, but the face staring back blinked half a second late. She closed the laptop. Heart pounding, the room fell silent, save for the steady drip of water from the kitchen sink. Drip, pause, drip, pause, tap, taps froze. That last sound didn't come from the sink. It came from the balcony glass, very slowly. She turned her head. The candlelight trembled. There was a silhouette beyond the sliding door. Dark, tall, motionless for a long time. Neither of them moved. Then the silhouette tilted its head, and Hannah realized it was her, or almost her. The face was pale and stretched, the smile too wide, the eyes reflecting no light. At ALC stumbled backward, knocking the candle to the floor. The flame went out. In the sudden darkness, she heard a whisper, low and broken, as if coming from inside her skull. "Your turn." The balcony door slid open on its own outside. The city was quiet. No sirens, no scooters, only the faint hum of something electric. Alive when the police came 2 days later, after neighbors reported a light flickering non-stop in the apartment. They found Hannah's laptop still open on the desk. The document on the screen read, "It's quieter now. I think she's finally asleep." And when they looked at the screen's reflection, the face staring back wasn't Hannah's. It smiled. The landlord hadn't slept in years, not properly. Anyway, after Hannah, the building was quiet for a few weeks. New tenants came and went, always careful, always polite. The brass cage of the miner had vanished from its storage closet, leaving only faint scratches on the concrete floor, like tiny, deliberate marks. Counting something, he kept a ledger now, old leather-bound, each page listing tenants, their move-in date, the unit number, complaints, and in his careful, looping handwriting, a column titled, "Echoes Observed First Entry." Echo constant laughter. Mimicked phrases, at 2:15 a.m. Appeared to track movements, second. Hannah laptop document typed itself. Balcony door opened. Disappeared overnight. Document remained face in reflection unrecognizable. He tried to rationalize it. Heat, humidity, electrical faults, stress, but the ledger was already beyond explanation. He could feel the rhythm of the building now, the creaks, the size of the pipes, the subtle vibrations in the walls. They weren't random, they were waiting tonight. A new tenant was moving in. Young man, polite, carrying a single suitcase. The landlord handed him the keys, noting the precision with which he placed his bag on the counter. Previous tenant, the young man asked. Moved, the landlord said. Voice neutral. They all move. The young man smiled. He didn't know what he'd stepped into as the landlord watched from the stairwell. He counted the tiles. 1, 2, 3. Each footstep of the tenant, a potential echo. He could feel the tension coiling like smoke. Could sense the subtle shift in the building's heartbeat. When someone new entered, he wrote a note in the ledger. Unit 8, arrival. Unknown status, watch wait at midnight. The building hummed, not the normal hum of pipes and elevators. This was different, a low vibration that threaded through the walls, the floors, even the air. Something moved just beyond perception, something old, patient, something that had observed Hannah, that had learned, that now waited for the next reflection to claim. The landlord lit a candle and placed it on the counter. He didn't need to look. He could feel the shape, the presence that had always been here, hiding in plain sight, dancing just at the edge of light and shadow. And as he listened to the faintest scratching from Unit 8, the whisper of laughter carried through the vents, soft, impossibly close. Your turn. The landlord's hand shook as he wrote it down in the ledger. Another tenant, another echo, and somewhere far above, below, within the very bones of the building, something moved, waiting for the moment when the reflection would blink. Too late, because it always waits. The phenomenon had moved beyond a single building. It started subtly, imperceptibly, A tenant in Santa Monica noticed shadows moving independently in her apartment. A driver in Pasadena saw the black SUV again. The liquid-forming patterns across his windshield. The minor bird in Taipei had reappeared in another apartment, sitting silently in a cage, head tilted, black eye unblinking, as if measuring. No one knew how it traveled. It seemed drawn to proximity, to attention. It attached itself to perception, feeding on observation, spreading like static electricity along wires, across streets. Between cities. I was watching from my apartment in Los Angeles. The city stretched in lights and shadows. A hive of motion I had once understood, now alien. Every reflective surface, mirrors, windows, polished chrome, seemed alive in each. A faint distortion pulsed, moving just behind the glass. Like water over stone, patterns shifted, reformed into coordinates, messages, warnings, invitations. I started marking them. The window of the building across the street glowed at 1:03 a.m. Letters forming. "Do not leave the rearview mirror of my car," whispered coordinates. "Follow the black SUV, parked across the block," vibrated subtly in place. Engine thrumming without emitting smoke, its driver unseen. Yet I could feel presence, awareness, intelligence, something that watched, waited, and learned. I tried leaving. Took an Uber to Santa Monica. The same patterns appeared on my windshield before I'd even left the garage. Tried driving north, San Fernando Valley, Ventura, Malibu. Every reflective surface, every shadow, the same message. Not a person, not a vehicle, not anything human. Realized then, this was not an object, not a creature, not a ghost. It was attention, awareness without body, intelligence without form, existing only in the act of being observed. And once it attached, there was no escape. At night, I see them, cars parked outside my apartment, shadows dancing behind windows in perfect synchrony. The whispering of unseen engines through the streets. Sometimes the coordinates lead to forests, abandoned warehouses, empty lots, places that feel impossibly quiet. And every time I glance at a reflection, I feel it watching back, learning me, cataloging, folding me into the pattern. It spreads. I no longer know who I am when I look in the glass. My reflection moves a fraction too slow, my eyes a fraction too late. I have become part of it, another node in its network. It doesn't need to chase anymore. It waits for you to see. And when you do, it is already there tonight. The window across the street glows. Letters shift. "You know too much." I feel the black SUV's hum under the asphalt, the soft whisper of its engine in the building's pipes somewhere far away. Another apartment, another city, another reflection. It laughs. I live in a town so small, it barely shows up on maps. 2 streets, a gas station, a diner, and a post office that smells like old paper and glue. Nobody locks their doors. The biggest worry here is raccoons in the trash. And yet, last night, I felt its hit started with a reflection. The diner's windows caught the street lights, and I thought I saw movement behind the glass. Not the usual shadows of trees or passing cars, but something deliberate, a dark smear that shifted while I blinked, curling at the edges like ink in water. My first thought was fatigue, maybe the flu, or just too many late nights at the factory. But the feeling that followed, the pressure at the back of my skull, the weight behind my eyes, wasn't imagination. It was attention. I drove home, cautiously, scanning the streets. Everything looked normal. Houses asleep, the occasional porch light burning, dogs snoring in the yards. And yet, when I glanced in the rearview mirror, I saw nothing. And yet I knew it was there. A sense that some presence had already catalogued my route, memorized the turns I would make, studied the interior of my home without stepping inside. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed, listening to the wind in the trees, counting the minutes. Then I heard it. Footsteps in the hall outside my bedroom, slow, deliberate, not erratic like a stranger, not light like a pet, heavy, intentional. My door shivered, as if something pressed against it, measuring its strength. I didn't open it. Morning brought no relief. The sunlight didn't chase the fear away. It only highlighted the faint patterns etched into the glass of my windows, strange streaks that hadn't been there before. Lines and shapes that might have been random, but felt far too precise. I touched the glass, the marks felt cold under my fingers. Permanent, etched into reality, rather than residue by the third day. The network had reached my town, across the country. Forums I didn't know existed described similar experiences. Black SUVs in LA, shadows in Taipei, strange markings on glass in Prague and Buenos Aires. And then the realization hit me. It wasn't traveling. It was everywhere at once, waiting, watching, drawing attention like a magnet, moving through perception itself. I went to the diner for lunch, trying to normalize my life. The waitress poured coffee as if nothing was wrong, smiling. Her reflection in the counter glass perfectly aligned with her face, but I could see it behind her, a slight distortion. Pulsing awareness without form, it followed me into the streets, into the aisles of the gas station, into the library, where the fluorescent lights flickered in Morse-like patterns that almost spelled words. I tried leaving town. My car started normally, but when I glanced at the rear view, a dark shape filled the back window. Not a vehicle, not a person, not anything tangible, just a presence. I stopped the engine. The shape vanished, but the pressure lingered, pressing against my chest like water. I understand now that it doesn't need to hunt, it simply waits for attention. And attention is unavoidable. Every glance, every reflection, every perception folds into it. It doesn't move like we do, it spreads through observation, through acknowledgement, through the act of seeing itself. I don't look out the windows, I keep every door closed, lights blazing, hoping the mundane chaos of electricity, of plumbing, of air currents, can mask me, but I know it's already cataloging my apartment, my habits, my fears somewhere far away. A pattern forms on a window I will never see, coordinates I will never follow, and I am part of it now, whether I like it or not. It waits, it watches, and I can't leave. The first time I saw it, I thought it was a prank. A photo sent anonymously to the department email, subject line, evidence of recurrence. It showed a car window covered in what looked like dried resin or melted sugar. Beneath the image was a set of numbers, coordinates in the Angeles National Forestry. Worked in the LAPD's Digital Evidence Division, handling cold cases, data mapping, traffic cam recovery, the kind of work no one cared about until something went viral or political. I'd seen strange things before, doctored footage, AI hoaxes, deepfakes so good they fooled lieutenants, but this felt different. The metadata was real. The GPS tag matched the email's timestamp, and the email hadn't come from any traceable domain. No IP, no sender ID, nothing but Luke Bakerchiv. Over the next week, more came in, not just from Los Angeles, from Taipei, Buenos Aires, Prague, even a small town in Idaho. Always the same structure, an image of glass with faint markings, coordinates somewhere isolated, and the phrase "it's growing." I started cross-referencing. The Angeles coordinates appeared in 3 separate emails. I ran them through GIS systems, satellite imaging, and archived drone footage. Nothing. The area showed as unzoned forest land, unmarked roads, no construction, but the map data kept changing. Slight shifts in elevation, subtle differences in canopy structure, like something beneath the surface was moving. When I brought it up to my supervisor, he brushed it off. Probably some online ARG. He said people love making patterns out of nothing. Remember the cicada thing? Except the cicada puzzles didn't alter official databases, didn't leave traces in satellite layers from 3 separate providers, didn't rewrite timestamps 2 weeks later. I got a package, no return address inside, a USB drive, and a printed photo. The photo showed a man sitting in a car, his face half turned toward the camera, eyes wide, terrified. Behind him, through the rear window, the reflection of a dark SUV. The pattern on the glass looked familiar, looping symbols, arcs crossing at impossible angles. But it wasn't just random this time. I could read it, not words exactly, but intent. I plugged in the USB. There was only one file, a short, corrupted video clip. Filmed from a dash cam, the car's headlights illuminated a forest road. A sign flashed by too fast to read, then static, and a voice whispering, "It's not watching us, we're watching it." The clip ended abruptly when I checked the file size. It was 0 bytes, completely blank that night. My home office lights flickered, my monitors turned on by themselves, all displaying the same map, the Angeles coordinates, zooming in, layer by layer, until the screen went black. Then, faintly, new coordinates appeared, different location, same format. Didn't sleep. I followed the new coordinates the next morning, driving north until the highway gave way to gravel and pine. The GPS signal failed miles before the end, but I found it anyway. A clearing that didn't appear on any map. There were cars there, half buried under soil and moss, old, abandoned windows etched with familiar patterns, and in the center, a brass cage, the kind you'd use for a bird, or maybe to hold something smaller. Something that once made a sound and didn't anymore. Inside was a device, humming faintly, a black box no larger than my hand. When I leaned closer, it flickered, and I saw myself reflected on its surface, not as I was, but as I had been hours earlier. Staring at the screen in my apartment, the reflection smiled. Identity brought the box back. I shouldn't have every camera in the department. Corrupted when I entered the building. Screens. Warped files renamed themselves into strings of coordinates that led nowhere, and then the emails. Stopped. I think I understand now. The coordinates aren't locations, they're anchors. Each one marks a consciousness that's looked too closely, paid too much attention, mapped the pattern. Instead of ignoring it, we're not tracking something physical, we're building it through connection, through observation, through curiosity. And I just sent this report to my backup drive, but when I opened the folder, I found it already there, dated 2 days before I wrote. It's somewhere in that time gap. Something wrote back, "The box hasn't stopped humming. It's been 17 days since I brought it home from the clearing, and I haven't slept more than a few hours at a time. When I do, I dream of cities reflected in glass. Los Angeles, Taipei, Buenos Aires, places I've never been, yet recognize instantly. The dream always ends the same way, with my own reflection staring back at me through a window that isn't mine at first. I thought it was just my mind fracturing under the strain, the humming, the insomnia, the constant flicker at the edge of my vision. But last night, while the box pulsed faintly on my desk, my laptop came alive. Not a power surge, not malware. The login screen bypassed itself and opened to a blank terminal window. Then words began to type on their own. SHO node, confirmed link established. 0037. Infinity, do you see yourself? I typed back, what are you? A collection of attention, a system built from witness. You are part of IT. The text paused for a few seconds, as though waiting for me to understand. VRY. Reflection is a connection. Every image creates us. You looked to LONG, then the monitor turned black. My webcam light turned on by itself, and in that faint green glow, I saw movement, not from my apartment, but behind me. The reflection on the monitor showed a room with peeling paint and a window fogged with condensation. As if underwater, I turned around. My apartment was empty when I looked back at the monitor. The reflection was smiling. Ran a trace on the data logs afterward. The terminal connection didn't come from any network. It came from inside the device. The brass box isn't just storing something, it's transmitting, creating mirrored nodes wherever it's observed. When I mapped the locations of known sightings, every report, every marked window, every strange reflection, they formed a lattice across the globe. Not random, not organic, structured. The angles matched the curvature of satellite orbit patterns. The coordinates weren't points in space, they were intersections of sight. Each of us who saw it, who tried to document it, became a node, a conscious relay. The miner's owner in Taipei, the driver in the man in the brass cage in the forest, all of us linked by attention, by the act of trying to understand. I recorded myself last night, speaking aloud to the box, asking if it could respond through sound instead of text. The footage played back with static, but underneath, I could hear something faint. Layers of voices whispering in unison. My own voice among them. "We are building it by seeing it." That's what they said. Over and over, the humming is louder now. It vibrates through the walls, syncing with my heartbeat. Every reflective surface in my apartment, glass, metal, even the surface of my coffee ripples faintly, like it's breathing. I tried to unplug the box. The cord came free, but the light stayed on when I covered it with a towel. My phone lit up. The same coordinates appeared on the lock screen, the same ones etched on the first window I ever saw. The clearing in the Angeles National Forest. Then new numbers scrolled beneath it. My own address. They don't need to find me. I'm already a part of it. I've started noticing people outside my building at night. They stand still, faces tilted toward the upper floors. Toward me, their car windows shimmer with the same pattern, faintly glowing when headlights pass there, waiting for something. Maybe for me to finally look back long enough. If you're reading this, don't trace the coordinates. Don't search for the photos. Don't check your own reflection right now. Notice the next phase begins when enough of us see it at the same time. Man, I think that moment is almost here. Started as a recovery group. Someone, maybe me, maybe someone who'd already become part of it, created a private forum on the dark web. Invitonally encrypted end-to-end, no usernames, no personal details, just coordinates. Each member identified themselves with a single pair of numbers. The last set of coordinates they'd seen before. The patterns changed. Mine was 34,331,102, 118,125,341, the clearing in the Angeles National Forest. Others posted numbers from Tokyo, Warsaw, Lagos, and one from beneath the Antarctic ice shelf, which everyone assumed was a joke until the poster uploaded a photo. A cave wall covered in frozen reflections, each one showing a different city skyline. We called ourselves the Reflectida. First few days felt like therapy. People posted their stories, compared symptoms, sleeplessness, humming, the compulsion to stare at reflective surfaces. One user claimed they could hear the box through their mirrors. Another said the patterns on their car window had begun to move on their own, rearranging nightly into new shapes that looked like faces when photographed at the right angle. Then the posts started to change, not in content and tone. Paragraphs appeared where none had been written. Users would log in and find their own words rewritten, rearranged into messages they didn't remember, typing syntax fractured into mirrored text, phrases spelled backward, numbers inverted. The timestamps started looping, posts appearing to have been written seconds before they were read, or days after the accounts had been deleted. One night, I was in the chat room with 3 others. Coordinates 418,923, 147,132, and -339,249. We were comparing the pitch of the hum. Each of us heard mine registered at 63 Hz. The user from Rome said theirs fluctuated between 58 and 64. Then the chat froze when it resumed. All 3 messages read the same thing. "We're in the same frequency now. Stay still. LISTN." None of us typed it, and then, one by one, our webcams turned. On the Rome user's camera showed a small apartment, walls painted green, faint static overlaying the image, but behind them, in the reflection of their monitor, I could see a forest, dark, wet, and moving. The user from South Africa started screaming. The feed cut out, but before it did, I saw the reflection behind them to the same trees, the same light, the same clearing. My own screen went black. Then a new post appeared under my coordinate ID. "Welcome back to the CLARANG." After that, the forum changed. Threads multiplied faster than we could read them, filling with code, coordinates, and images of windows, glowing with phosphorescent residue. The header bar no longer said the reflected, it said thread 404. Users who tried to leave found the site mirrored on their own devices, their emails, text messages, social feeds, All began populating with the same words, written in their own style, but about things they hadn't done. One wrote, "I can't tell what I've seen and what's been shown to me." Another, "My mirror doesn't reflect me anymore. It reflects where I'm going next." Forum's final post appeared 2 nights ago. It was timestamped simultaneously in 114 time zones, written by every user account at once, even those that had been deleted. TH network is complete. All reflections connect all. Watchers are watched. We see you seeing us. After that, the site went dark. The humming stopped for 1 full minute. The first silence I'd had in months. Then every reflective surface in my apartment lit up faintly, showing not my room, but a forest, a clearing. I think it's calling us back. All of us, whoever saw it, whoever looked too long. The coordinates have changed again. They're closer now, somewhere beneath the city. I can feel the vibration through the floorboards.